All right, shall we turn now to Revelation chapter 11 as we continue our journey through the Bible. John tells us here in chapter 11, "There was given to me a reed like a rod, and the angel stood saying, 'Rise and measure the temple of God and the altar, and those that worship therein. But the court which is without the temple, leave it out. Don't measure it, for it's given unto the Gentiles, and the holy city shall they tread underfoot for 42 months. Ezekiel measured this same wall. He said he measured in Ezekiel 42:20 by all four sides. It had a wall around it, 500 reeds long and 500 broad, to make a separation between the sanctuary and the profane place. God has a 7-year covenant with the nation of Israel, which is yet to be fulfilled. It was a 70-week or 77-year period that God had established for the nation of Israel to bring in really the coming of Christ ultimately. There was to be 69 7-year periods between the commandment to restore and rebuild Jerusalem to the coming of the Messiah, the Prince. At the time that Daniel was writing his prophecy, he was in captivity in Babylon, and the Lord was telling him that from the time the commandment would go forth to restore and rebuild Jerusalem, which had been destroyed by the Babylonian army, it would be 69 7-year periods, or 483 years. March 14th, 445 BC, King Artaxerxes gave to Nehemiah the commandment to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. 69 7-year periods, or 483 years later, Jesus made his triumphant entry into Jerusalem. The Messiah, the Prince, did come, presented himself as their Messiah, but as the prophecy to Daniel went on, but the Messiah will be cut off and not receive the kingdom. So Jesus was cut off, as we know, crucified, did not receive the kingdom, and the Lord then did prophesy to Daniel that the Jews would then be dispersed, but that left the 1 7-year cycle unfulfilled. And this last 7-year cycle will precede the second coming of Jesus as he comes in power and glory to establish God's kingdom upon the earth. And so the 7-year period is yet future, and it will begin when the Antichrist, well, actually it will begin when the Antichrist makes a covenant with the nation of Israel to restore and to rebuild their temple, and so that's yet future, and that will be a 7-year period. So the 77-year segments are allotted to Israel. And in Daniel 9:27, it talks about this man of sin, the leader of the revived Roman Empire, will come and confirm the covenant with many for 1 week or 7-year period. And in the midst of the 7-year period, he will cause the sacrifice and the oblations to cease. For the overspreading of abominations, he will make it desolate, even until the end, and that which is determined shall be poured out upon the desolate. So you find then this last 7 years is divided into different time slots, it says 42 weeks. That would be 3.5 years. It's divided into 1,290 days or 60 days, and that's, again, 3.5 years. And it's divided into times, a year, or 2 years' time, a year, and a half time, or a half of a year. So there are many ways by which the Bible uses the time factor of 3.5 years, and we'll observe it as we move on here in the book of Revelation. This 7-year period divided into 2 sections of 3.5 years. When the covenant is made with the nation of Israel by the leader of the Western European powers, allowing them to rebuild their temple there on the Temple Mount, this is what the 11th chapter, verses 1 and 2 is talking about. As John is given the reed like unto a rod about 10 feet, and the angel stood saying, Rise and measure the temple of God, the altar and those that worship, but the court which is without, don't measure it, because it's been given to the Gentiles. And as Ezekiel measured it, again he was told, don't measure the outer court, or to measure the wall. He said the wall is to separate the holy place from the profane. So what is going to happen is that Israel will rebuild the temple, but they'll build it, I'm certain, to the north side of the Dome of the Rock Mosque. And going over to Israel, you'll see that there is a large area of the Temple Mount area that is unoccupied, and that's where the new temple will be built. A wall will be erected to separate it from the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock on the southern part of the Temple Mount area, and the temple will be rebuilt in from the east gate on the northern part of the Temple Mount area. You go over there and it becomes very obvious where it's going to be built, and there are many of the scholars who believe that Solomon's temple did not stand where the Mosque of Omar presently stands, but it was actually north of it, some 200 feet or so, and that the Dome of the Spirits that cover over this bit of bedrock was actually the site of the Holy of Holies in Solomon's temple. So that's all sort of set up. Now, after the temple is rebuilt, the Antichrist will come, and this leader of Europe, he will stand in the temple declaring that he is God and demanding to be worshipped as God, and the false prophet that accompanies him will order a image or an idol to be made of the Antichrist, and that is to be set in the temple, and the world will be ordered to worship the beast or the Antichrist and his image that is there. Let's read about it. In Matthew 24, Jesus is talking, and he said, when you see the abomination of desolation. Now that abomination of desolation is the time when the Antichrist will stand in the temple of God and demand to be worshipped as God. As Daniel says, that's the abomination which causes the desolation. So Jesus, referring to Daniel's prophecy, when you see this, the Antichrist there in the temple, declaring that he is God, when you see the abomination of desolation that was spoken of, Jesus said, by Daniel the prophet, standing in the holy place, that is in the new temple, whoever reads, Jesus said, let him understand. Then let them which are in Judea flee to the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him who is in the field return back to take his clothes. Woe unto them that are with child and to them that are nursing in those days. But pray that your flight will not be in winter, neither on the Sabbath day, for then shall be great tribulation